the master finger of God point that shapes our lives. If you follow astrology, you know about the inconjunction, two planets 60 degrees apart in a sextile, which intersect at 150 degrees on the other side of the chart. It is a yod point. It is a finger of God pointed, because it's as if God is pointing the inconjunction point and saying, this is the answer, but you'll have to figure it out yourselves. Some time ago, I coined what I termed the master yod and saw how it moved through the cosmos and saw how that this finger of God point changed our lives as it moved through our chart and touched our planets one at a time. This master point is comprised of the slowest planets, Pluto and Neptune. Pluto has a 245-year orbit, while Neptune has a 150-year orbit, and yet Pluto goes through in some signs faster than the others, depending on its orbit. Around 1939, Pluto positioned itself to be 60 degrees behind Neptune, give or take, and they have jockeyed through the cosmos in this 60-degree pattern until now. This is the master yod. Where it is and where it points shows what's activated in your chart. It is just now in 2022. It's just now with Neptune in Pisces and Pluto in Capricorn that they are starting to separate and go their own way. For almost 80 years, they have been companions. In the late 30s, they met up when Pluto was at the end of Cancer, and now in 2022, Pluto is in Capricorn and Neptune is Pisces. In this time frame, they have traveled half of the signs. And the finger of God point is pointing at the end of Leo. In 2022, we have a different wrinkle with Saturn between them, or the arrow to Pluto's and Neptune's bow. All three point to the end of Leo, where Pluto languished in the 50s. So most of 50s children have this finger God point pointing at their Pluto in their native chart. Pluto spent around 18 years in Leo, while it only stayed for 12 years in the subsequent signs. In the 1950s, it languished at the end of Leo, where the God point is pointing out over Pluto in their natal chart. Because of Saturn being the arrow in between them, it will come down hard for the political figures born in the 50s, who weren't forthright with their dealings. You can see here that Pluto only moved from 21 degrees in 1952 to 28 degrees in 1957. Here, the finger of God point in 2022 is at 28 degrees of Leo. Pluto and Neptune move into Aquarius and Aries in 2024. The point will be in Virgo. Key players in the political world are born in the 50s. Steve Bannon in 1953, with Pluto at 25 degrees in Leo. Lindsey Graham at 1956 at 27 degrees. Mark Meadows in 1959 at 2 of Virgo, while Kevin McCarthy is a bit younger, so he might get a reprieve. While Pluto and Neptune trigger the finger of God point, showing where the energies are going, now these politicians have to contend with Saturn as the arrow between them and have to deal with the Saturn opposition to their Leo Pluto. Even Trump didn't have this one. but he does have Mars at that point now. So Saturn opposing Mars with Neptune and Pluto as the God point, he can have something as benign as a dental extraction or surgery, or as much as an attempt at his life. People born in the 50s who have a basically normal life won't have much to tick Saturn off with. When Pluto moved into Virgo in the late 50s and Neptune moved into Scorpio, the God point moved into Aries. When Pluto moved into Libra in the early 70s and Neptune went into Sag, the point moved through Taurus. When Pluto moved into Scorpio in the early 80s and Neptune went into Capricorn, the point was through Gemini. In the 90s, when Pluto went into Sagittarius and Neptune went into Aquarius, the point went into Cancer. Last ingress was with Pluto in Capricorn and Neptune in Pisces shortly before Obama was inaugurated. Recent times, we see that Ronald Reagan was president when the point was going through Gemini. When the finger of God point pointed to Uranus and then Mars was when Reagan was shot. When it went through Cancer, Bill Clinton was president when the good times rolled, when the Sun and Venus and Jupiter being in a finger God point. When Leo was in the crosshairs in 2009, it was when Barack Obama was elected and Trump behind him. Interesting, Barack is a Leo and DJT was a Leo rising and Pluto in Leo. Trump was the energy of Leo and then Pluto took it to the 10th power by adding sex and domination and mafia-like control. With the finger of God point at the end of Leo now, Biden is feeling the energy in the 10th, where it is sandwiched before the 10th. We can look to the 10th sign as where the president is deposited in the USA chart and is between Neptune and Pluto, and Saturn is going through the 10th, which is why Biden is getting the flack now. Saturn is just moving into the 10th as it takes up the position of arrow to the Pluto-Neptune bow. Saturn went into the 10th as Trump was halfway through his term. The finger of God point is pointing at the 4th house, saying that Biden needs to focus on women, mothers, real estate, family, and core values. In my chart, with my moon in Taurus, I had my 3 kids from 1967 to 72 when the finger of God point traversed my moon. In the 80s, when the point reached Uranus, I started to do astrology and different modalities around holistic and Chinese astrology. I started to do readings and learn the Chinese meridian system and learn of herbology and how they intertwined. When Saturn reared its head, it wasn't a great time when money was hard to come by. When the end of the Saturn time occurred, a relative had died, and though It was the worst way it could happen, and I wouldn't have wanted that way. But he left me a modest life insurance policy to take care of my needs when the point went over Jupiter. That gave me enough money to modestly live for the rest of my life. In the last few years, Pluto was triggered and had to change my relationships. I wanted more equality and the power split equally. Now for me, I'm not a competitive person, nor I don't need a lot of money and power, so that was the way I had to play it. But for the political power people born in the 50s, they are going to deal with a reckoning with Saturn between the arrow position of Neptune and Pluto now, as the finger of God points to their natal Pluto in Leo. Now, one last chart with a new wrinkle. We can see with Liz Cheney's chart, born July 28, 1966, in Madison, Wisconsin, that Neptune in 2022 is about to melt down her Saturn, her wound around father issues, while Pluto is in her career house for power. We see that the finger of God point here in 2022 is between her Sun and Pluto placements as she moves into the intrigue of Pluto, as it is moving from when it went over her Sun as she ascended to the chair of the House Republican Conference. We can see her star power ascended. She became the golden child when she moved up the ladder to the Republican ranks, and now it moves into Pluto's. She is in the eye of the hurricane as she is into Pluto's power dynamic. So there's a breakdown of the master yod or finger of God point to help you chart your key life transitions.